You are now watching Maine Wire TV with your host, Tom Shattuck, featuring Maine Wire Editor-in-Chief Steve Robinson and the indispensable John Featherston.
All right, make it Steve popping in at any time now. Graham Pollard may join us. Any number of folks from Call of the Newsroom may pop in. But right now you've got me and John Featherston. Featherston, John, fresh off of a Lewiston City Council meeting, which is, I guess you could say that we're kicking into gear the movement on the Lewiston Shooting Fund controversy.
Yeah, the story's not going away. And, as I've referred to her, she's an angel on earth. Amy Sussman went to the Lewiston City Council meeting last night and really poured her heart out to the council. And I have to say, and I flat out say it, I mean, the mayor and a couple city councilors were extremely rude to her. Not so much in their words, but by their actions. Here Amy is telling the story about her nephew who died on the day that he received his college diploma, killed in the shooting. And she's, being factual. She's saying to the mayor, hey, you said you were going to get back to me. You didn't. She says to Council President David Chittum, you said you were going to do an investigation. And the only investigation you did is you checked out my LinkedIn page and you didn't do the investigation that you said you were going to do. Scott Harriman, who is also running for state rep, is literally doodling a picture and looking at the computer the whole time. He didn't even make a single eye contact with her. And there was another city councilor, Mike Roy. He was sitting there doodling on his paper. And the fact that they didn't even have the common human decency to look this poor lady in the eye and go, thanks for coming today. I mean, what a tragedy your family's gone through. And instead what they did is, okay, are you done speaking? Thanks. Sit down. Next.
Oof.
I mean, why are you in public service? I mean, there's always going to be a time when you don't agree with what the speaker says, but thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. We'll follow up. We'll get back to you. And, speaker after speaker goes to the podium last night and says, guys, open up an investigation. It's that simple. Just open up an investigation and see what you find. Thanks. Sit down. David Chittum actually goes, oh, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, but, we've exceeded the time limit on this, we have to move on to more important things. Is there anything more important than this?
He didn't say more important things, did
he? He did indicate that, that it was time to move on and they had to get to the agenda. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't use the exact words.
Yeah, but he made it clear that he felt that there were more important things to move on
to go to. And I'm just sitting there going, what reality am I in that this isn't the most important thing that you have? It's gone national. It's being reported by national outlets. People are mad about it. One of the nonprofits has agreed to return the money. And the only good thing that came out of that meeting last night is at the very end of the meeting, I stress the word very end of the meeting, Councilor Susan Longchamps gave what I will refer to as an emotional and heartfelt speech vowing that she will do everything in her power. And she apologized that she hasn't done anything up to this point, but she'll do everything in her power to get these nonprofits to return the money.
To hear that there was a blasé approach by some of the folks in that room is absolutely maddening. You understand people have been in politics for a while, talking about the zoning board issues or how many more parking spaces you need for the Whole Foods can be humdrum and even mundane. But we're talking about a massacre that happened there. Like, holy hell. Yep. Where the hell is the humanity in that? So we've got some Steve Robinson with us and Graham Pollard. Before we get to you guys, we've got a video wrap of some of the action from last night of John Featherston and some of the folks at the Lewiston City Council meeting. We'll roll on here.
Hey, good evening. John with the Maine Wire, Tuesday night, about 10 minutes after 10 o'clock. I'm actually sitting in the parking lot of the Lewiston Police Department because I just left the Lewiston City Council meeting. And I have to tell you, public comment started tonight at the Lewiston City Council meeting, and Amy Sussman And if you don't know who Amy Sussman is, I strongly recommend that you find out who Amy Sussman is. Amy is the aunt of a victim of the Lewiston shooting fund. He got his college diploma on the day that he was tragically shot in Lewiston. And Amy Sussman went to the podium tonight and poured her heart out to the city council.
There were two tragedies here, the shooting and the MCF keeping $1.9 million from those who are suffering and need it most. I'm not an elected leader, but I have used my voice, and now one of the nonprofits is giving their money to survivors and families. You could have made this happen, but you chose to do absolutely nothing. You left it up to me. So I ask you again, do you think it is acceptable to take advantage of people at the worst moment of their lives?
And what I witnessed was one city councilor looking at his computer, and God knows what he was looking at. And that city councilor was Scott Harriman, who, by the way, is running for state rep in the February special election. He wants to be an elected official, and he didn't care one iota about what Amy Sussman had to say. And it was shocking to people in the room, and it was disturbing to see people in the room. There was another city councilor, Mike Roy. He did not appear to be paying attention and was scribbling on his notepad and wasn't making eye contact with people. But people after people, elected officials, candidates running for governor, and just common Lewiston citizens come to the city council and say, listen, you've got the power to open up an investigation and to right a wrong with the Lewiston shooting fund, 29 nonprofits taking funds that weren't affected by the shooting.
A lot of questions, I think, that are legitimate have been raised, and the response feels dismissive.
I've asked, begged for you guys to do an investigation, and you guys have the power to fix this. You gotta get up in the morning and talk to you guys, and I do the right thing.
And an investigation would do one of two things: prove that something was done improperly, because it's been proven that some of the nonprofits were on the steering committee that steered the money towards themselves, or more importantly, possibly come back and say, hey, we did a thorough investigation and we didn't find anything, and we need to move on. The apathy that I saw from the mayor and the city council was stunning to me. But there is a good ending to this story, and it's what prompted me to do this video. At the end of the meeting tonight, City Councilor Longchamps, Susan Longchamps, made a vow to the public that she will do everything in her power to get that money back from the nonprofits and back to the victims.
And I'd like to apologize to the families that have been affected by the mass shooting. I've been told that there's nothing that I can do as a counselor. And I'm sorry that I listened to that, but I vow today to do everything I can to try to see how the victims that were truly affected are somehow, they somehow retrieve that money that was donated for them.
Now, she might be pushing a string up a hill because it doesn't seem like the rest of the city council. But yeah, I am stupefied that a person who wants to run for higher office as state rep doesn't even appear to care, much less have a comment. Amy Sussman flat out called out the mayor and the council president, David Chittum, tonight.
Mayor Shalene, you called me 6 days after receiving the email. You forgot how I was related to the shooting, but you stated that you would look into the matter and get back to me. You never did. President Chittum, you said you were, and I quote, saddened to learn of your nephew's death in such a cruelly ironic way on the day he received his diploma, end quote. And you called the issue that I presented to you a misunderstanding, but said that you would investigate. That investigation included looking me up on LinkedIn twice. I wonder, what investigation did you do other than investigating me?
Gubernatorial candidate David Jones, for the third time, has gone to them and said, hey, listen, you have the power to make this right. Open up an investigation. The apathy that I saw, and then saw later in the meeting how these guys could screw up a free lunch. Debating, how many people can be on a committee was a bigger focus to them than writing the biggest tragedy in the history of Maine. The story's not going to go away. The story's gotten national attention. It's been featured on Fox News. It's been featured on News Nation. I brought it up to the Republican leadership today in Augusta, and they're disgusted by it too. But it seems like the people who can fix this problem the fastest and the most effective really just don't even want to touch it. So check back with the Maine Wire for more updates. I'm John Featherston.
Steve, a lot of times with public comments, you'll have city councilors or board of ed members who will be nonplussed. A lot of times they don't want to reward the song and dance they consider happening in front of them, or take part in a viral moment. But it seems to me that this calls for a bit of humanity, and to have city councilors doodling and just put out by this is a terrible look.
Yeah, that was not performative. That was not made for a viral clip. I think we've seen that there have been some strategic stunts at school board meetings, like some activists at the meetings in Augusta doing things to draw attention to the transgender bathroom policies or something like that. I would understand, the lefty school board members who support the trans ideology stuff not paying attention or walking out. I would at least understand that on a human level. But this wasn't that. This wasn't a stunt. Amy, I guess John and I have come to know her, so we're very familiar with the level of work, effort, energy, heart that she's put into this. So too I think are the people of Maine, because she's been on George Hale and Rick Tyler. She's been on this show. She's been on Fox News. People know that she's put a lot of blood, sweat, and toil into advocating for a wrong to be righted here. To have them sit there and act like there's nothing going on, that there was nothing important, nothing emotionally chilling happening there, is sociopath level. I think of the viral video we got from the Portland City Council when there was a woman there talking about making sure that some of the rats at a recently cleaned homeless camp were not poisoned, but were instead captured and humanely relocated to a rat facility, because she said that they were domesticated rats. The city councilors were paying attention to that. There was no doodling going on. They were paying attention and being respectful and listening to this insane woman talk about domesticated rats at the former homeless camp. So the juxtaposition, the way they've comported themselves, all of my experiences with the Lewiston City Council members that John was referring to, they seem to just be very callow, very callous, not maybe missing some part of the human experience. They're not even a partisan criticism. I don't expect every person in politics to agree with the things that I agree with, but they seem to just lack basic human empathy, and that was on display there. And the only explanation that I can conceive of is that there's a deeper culpability on the part of those city councilors. And I'll say that we know that Councilor Harriman is very close with the Maine People's Alliance. We know that the Maine People's Alliance is very influential in Maine politics, but especially in Lewiston politics. They've got an office right there on Lisbon Street. It's probably, a stone's throw from the Mogadishu store where Mama Shukri is no longer serving her curry. And they were the fiscal sponsor for the Community Organizing Alliance, which was the political project of Gateway Community Services. So it's one interconnected, incestuous family there. And they probably, there are probably a lot of people who knew that this money was being piped into NGOs that weren't going to do anything for the survivors or the victims' families. So I would guess that they don't want to breathe any life into an investigation because they're worried about what that investigation would find, because they know what that investigation would find.
Steve, you and the Facebook chat are reading off the same sheet of music here. Lily says it's because they are involved and she's getting a lot of agreement over there, Graham. So is Steve right? Is it that easy? It's just simply a culpability?
Well, probably. And when we look at the Maine People's Alliance, we have them actively campaigning for Shenna Bellows. We have a Maine People's Alliance, a former Maine People's Alliance employee is the campaign manager for Graham Plattner. We have both Graham Plattner and Shenna Bellows marching hand in hand with Sophia Khalid in Lewiston. And we have Sophia Khalid posting on her TikTok telling everyone to vote for Graham Plattner. So it's one network. It's one highly coordinated network. Obviously, the Maine People's Alliance is involved in a whole array of Democrat politics, not specifically with Lewiston, but they clearly wield a lot of influence. And if you're someone like Scott Harriman, maybe it behooves you to play into the Maine People's Alliance system because they've got this whole network of people when you're running for state representative that could potentially help you in that effort.
And, you know, another thing I'll say is if you look at the campaign finance documents that the city of Lewiston makes available, I think Mayor Carl Shaleen lent his campaign $40,000. Is that right, John?
That's correct. Yep.
What's the the salary for that position is going to be what, 150K?
Oh, I don't even think it's that much. I think it's more like a stipend position. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, why is he paying $40,000 of, I think, you know, his ex-wife's money, theoretically his own money? Why is he spending that much money on his campaign for that mayoral spot? You know, I can tell you that this is not going to serve as a launch pad, you know, putting him on a trajectory for the United States Senate or the presidency. I don't think even he is deluded enough to imagine that he hasn't reached his political ceiling here. So just the fact that he would spend $40,000 to become the mayor of Lewiston is bizarre to me. And I don't have any you know, theories as to why he might do that. But it's bizarre behavior, and it should draw attention, I would think, from voters in Lewiston. He should be asked why this position was so valuable to him if he's not even willing to, you know, give care and compassion to the aunt of a mass shooting victim, the most horrendous act of violence in the state, in his city ever. He's not even willing to give this woman the time of day when all she's advocating for is for charitable contributions to help people who were shot. She's not asking for tax cuts. She's not asking to, you know, ban abortion. She's not asking to, you know, roll back environmental regulations so that they can put more dioxin in the Androscoggin River. She's asking for charitable contributions to go to people who were shot and have had to pay out of pocket and continue to pay out of pocket for surgeries. You know, I learned today about victims of the shooting who sustained physical injuries who are even still today having to decide whether or not they'll be able to afford to have medical treatments, all directly related to the shooting. And they could have gotten money from this big bucket of money donated specifically to help them. But instead, we had to give $65,000 to Ayman Osman so he could pretend to teach little Somali kids how to play soccer. And the truth is, you know, I don't think much investigating needs to be done to figure out what happened here. I think Gateway Community Services was very involved in steering this money to where it was steered. And I don't think that the money is going to be clawed back. I don't think there's anything to claw back. I mean, these were, you know, fake NGOs that just existed on paper. There's no assets that could be clawed back if it, you know, if there was ever any kind of litigation. But I do think that there's a law on the books in Maine. I think it's called the Maine Charitable Solicitations Act that governs what happens when an organization raises money and then uses that money for a purpose other than what was advertised. And I think that you're probably going to see some litigation against the people involved for violating that act. Whether that succeeds or not, I have no idea. I presume that the judicial branch of the Maine state government is about as on the level as the executive and the legislative branch and the city council branches. But I think that the fight here is far from over. Right. And if you read back and look at some of the stories that were written before Amy and Governor Paul LePage started making a fuss about this, and then the Maine Wire interviewed Amy as well as some of the survivors and victims' family members. All of the media organizations in Maine totally cleared this. They created a permission structure where giving money to these NGOs was acceptable. They heard complaints from Facebook pages and said, well, A.G. Fry says it's fine. A.G. Fry looked into this, it's fine. So therefore nothing bad happened. And you guys are just crazy conspiracy theorists. We've come a long way since then. And I think it's entirely because of Amy's advocacy, but also because she's right. She has the benefit of being right about her criticism of what happened.
After the Boston Marathon bombing, they brought in the Fed. They brought in the feds, essentially, this guy Feinberg, to help make sure that all the donations, and there were tons of donations, were going to the right people, because there was a lot of fraud. And so what you found is that you had people who were suggesting they were at the marathon bombing who were, in another country, and people trying to wet their beaks with this thing. But those people who were the scammers were not on the steering committee of the Boston Marathon Charity Fund. I mean, that structurally you have a steering committee that's able to steer money to themselves in any situation is amazing. And it's absurd. And to violently grab at this cash drop, at the feet of a bloody massacre without flinching, shows motivations that do not share values with a democracy of Christians. I'll say that. It's just gross. You mentioned Shenna Bellows previously. We've got the Maine Wire. Official Secretary of State website and social pages have issued a press release reacting to the alleged discussions of impeaching her over her refusal to issue confidential license plates. No impeachment proposals have actually been brought forward. But anyway, she's lashing out. She's obviously oversensitive. Mm-hmm. She's doing more. She's doing more Instagram posts and little catty posts talking about the Constitution and this and that. And she definitely is. This is getting to her. And if you just if you watch yesterday's episode with Steve and Garrett talking about the ride along they did, you know how crucial anonymity is for these law enforcement folks. And I think that she knows that this looks like, I won't even call it tampering. Steve, it looks like sabotage from the Secretary of State.
I would like to know, where does the Secretary of State's office end and Shenna Bellows' campaign for governor begin?
Yep, exactly.
Because this is a political statement. It looks like it was written by political staffers. Maybe they just made a mistake. And you know how sometimes when you're running, you're Pierre Delecto. What was the name of Mitt Romney's fake Twitter handle? I think it was Pierre Delecto. When you got your ghost Twitter account where you're really, really snarky next to your official one. Sometimes you mix up the posts. That might be what happened here, because this was clearly written by a campaign staffer, and government resources, taxpayer resources were leveraged to help Shenna Bellows run for office. If there isn't a law against that, there should be. And we saw this coming. This was predictable in the run-up to her declaring her candidacy. She hired a whole bunch of communication staffers, paying them at the Deputy Secretary of State level. You never saw this happen with Charlie Summers or Matt Dunlap. They never would have used the office in such an overtly political way. It's unprecedented. I don't think it's healthy for a democracy to have this happen. And the fact that she continues to insist on not recusing herself from oversight of either the primary elections or the general elections is foul. And I'm waiting to see, when will the Democratic candidates for office realize who Shenna is, drop this bizarre partisan loyalty, and call on her to recuse herself from that primary. Because I know that privately, they have all the same concerns that conservatives in this state do about Shenna's integrity when it comes to managing an election. All you need to know about her integrity is the series of video clips we have where she says that the idea of non-citizen voting in Maine elections is built on lies. And then in a liberal podcast, she says, yeah, I'm sure there's non-citizens registered to vote. And then later she says, I never said that. Okay, well, we know your integrity. We know that we can't believe anything that comes out of your mouth. And you're just, making mouth sounds that you think will get you closer to power. That's all that's happening. All of her mouth sounds are about getting her closer to power. And she like pantomimes what she thinks, a real human being would do. But there's collateral damage to that. Just look at all the balls that are being dropped at the Secretary of State's office. Every time my ID has to be scanned, I'm reminded of Shenna Bellows' incompetence because the barcode doesn't scan. And there's like, a couple 100,000 people in the state who have that problem as well. The license plates were all screwed up. Ballots being sent to other states. We still don't know about the 250 Amazon absentee ballots, by the way. Aren't we overdue for an update on that one? Secretary Bellows, you did vow to tirelessly investigate that one. So what's the deal there?
I tried to ask her about it yesterday. She ran away.
Yeah, it was a very chilling day, I would say, at the State House for some of those people with a high degree of Maine Wire staffers around. Some very unhappy looking people, lots of scuttling about, which I take as a sign of success on our part. But Secretary Bellows is clearly abusing her office for political gain. I think that it's probably good that the lawmakers are at least going through the motions to impeach her and put the Democratic lawmakers on record again supporting her. It's good that Representative Billy Bob Folkingham proposed a simple emergency legislative change that would have stopped Shenna Bellows from declassifying, doxing, unmasking the unmarked vehicles. Even though you know that those votes are going to fail, it's important to bring them forward because it shows constituents what you would do, and it also places your opponent on the record as having opposed something that's a policy that I would imagine is supported by 70 or 80%, if not more, people here in the state of Maine. But it's an impeachment effort that's doomed to fail, but more power to you, Shenna, with your Instagram videos. I think you could she probably could take some tips from Graham Plattner or Mom Donnie, though. She doesn't quite have the same videography skills. I mean, she doesn't even have the same videography skills as I do, but I mean, that would require her having some raw talent.
Thoughts, Graham, or advice for Shenna Bellows for her content stream?
Well, there's a lot here. First of all, we put up the press release on the Secretary of State website, but they also had graphics made with quotes all over the Secretary of State Facebook pages. So it's clearly a campaign. I mean, it's just naked campaigning is what it is. And we've seen this before with that account. They've been promoting specific events that she's been going to that have really nothing to do with Secretary of State activities. But the Secretary of State pages will put out here is Shenna Bellows at XXX event. You can scroll down the Secretary of State Facebook page and see it for yourself. She's also got a state car that the taxpayers are paying for, which I imagine is being used for campaigning. And I don't believe Attorney General Fry or Matt Dunlap have a state car. So how did Shenna pull that one? It's a good question. And it's a Chevy Volt. She also had a unbelievable trip down to D.C. where she appeared in studio for MS Now, is what they're now calling it, MSNBC, where she said that, I posted the clip earlier today, that Kristi Noem has murdered 2 Americans, which seems like, I don't know, something that Kristi Noem could potentially sue her over, because I'm assuming she's talking about the ICE shootings, but to extrapolate that out to saying Kristi Noem has murdered 2 Americans is just blatantly false and defamatory, I would suggest. And then she also, there was something in there, and it was some story that must have been going viral in liberal circles, but I'd never heard it before, about Tulsi Gabbard had some meeting or event, and then she didn't show up to it, and it was like involving secretaries of state. And they asked her about it. Shenna Bellows like, well, it's because they're cowards. They play cowboys on TikTok and Twitter, but they're scared of me. They're scared of Shenna Bellows. So I just clipped that with the videos of her scampering away from John, the fastest I've ever seen her move before. And then she's ran away from John at several other occasions. It's like, who's the real coward here, Shenna? But yeah, the last point I'll make is that, to my knowledge, there hasn't actually been she isn't officially facing impeachment right now. The allegations, to my understanding, are that Billy Bob or Republican leadership was discussing either an investigation or a potential impeachment into her. And now she's posting statements playing the victim per usual, saying, I'm the first elected official in the United States facing impeachment over my stance against ICE. I'm defending you, brave Mainers, against ICE, and these evil Republicans are trying to impeach me for it. So it's classic Shenna Bellows playing victim over something that hasn't even happened, and then also making it a campaign statement when really it's way more about ICE, as we've talked about extensively. It's about the U.S. Marshals, everyone else involved. So I'm also, like Steve was saying, very curious when other Democrats are going to start going after her, because there's a lot of material there, that's for sure.
So I want to say two things. One, to call somebody on national TV in your capacity as a Secretary of State, to call somebody a murderer is problematic. And I don't know if that's should be considered something that's under or the rubric of her job description that she's going there for, that the people pay her for. But regardless, nobody seems to care anymore. I also say that in some states, if you're using campaign resources government resources to campaign, you could end up in jail in some states. Believe it or not, a Democrat in Massachusetts almost went to jail a few years ago for doing that. I'll get to something else that I think is growing. We've got a developing story behind the scenes we're still fleshing out right now. But we did tweet out this video. Camden Hill students and teachers walked out of class with bleep ICE signs last Friday. The comment is, meanwhile, Maine ranks near the bottom of the nation test scores. We've gotten some indications that there are some other people, not just paid teachers, but there's some other people impressing kids into service from the private sector as well. And we're looking into that. John, when did it become okay for both public and private people to impress kids into activism, which includes marching, chanting, sometimes leaving school early?
I hope the answer to that is it's never become acceptable, but it's being tolerated by people now, and that needs to stop today. I mean, there was even the Libs of TikTok retweeted something out of Massachusetts where the teachers were teaching the kids how to march and hold signs, to anti-ICE, call out ICE. It's not acceptable. And what has happened in this society now is that people are afraid to speak up and call out the lunacy that's going on in these schools. And it's not acceptable. And a lot of parents are, working jobs. They don't know that this is happening. And what these schools are doing, if they're not trying to transition your kid's gender, and I've talked about this even on Maine Wire TV, you have a culture in school teaching children that police are bad, ICE are bad. Now, listen, everybody's entitled to their opinion, but you can't preach this to kids. Kids are in school to learn how to read, write, do arithmetic. Schools should never be a political place. Politics shouldn't ever be discussed in schools. These are your woke superintendents, your ultra woke liberal school boards that are allowing this conversation to even transpire. I just wrote an article today about the Lewiston school committee and how the superintendent went on and did a 50-minute presentation about how we're keeping our schools safe from ICE. But his first sentence is, ICE hasn't even been to our schools. So why are you spending 50 minutes in a school committee meeting talking about how keeping your school safe when your very first sentence is, well, ICE hasn't been here? I mean, we've got a real problem here.
Yeah, and I would even say that these superintendents and school leaders are inflicting trauma on their students. We know that We interviewed Patricia Hyde, the top ICE official in Maine. The schools were not being targeted. The schools that were, implementing lockdown procedures or were, falsely leading the students to believe that, stormtroopers were going to kick open the door and drag people away for no other reason than the color of their skin. They were lying to these kids, but they were creating a culture of, fear and really intimidating them. And it was emotionally abusive what they did. They were inflicting the very harm that they claim that President Trump was inflicting just by enforcing congressionally approved immigration laws. And by the way, doing it at a rate similar to, if not less than, his Democratic predecessors. So the school officials are guilty of the very crimes that they're accusing ICE or the president of committing. And I mean, just the idea that they would go into lockdown mode just because somebody has, somebody like Mayor Shalene has typed onto the Stop ICE app that they spotted a black SUV is so irresponsible. And if you were engaged in that level of irresponsible and abusive behavior towards young, impressionable students in the private sector, there would be consequences. But because these are public schools and they're all unionized, and we have unions that exist for the express purpose of protecting bad teachers, no one's going to face any ill consequences from this. No one's going to lose their job for terrorizing these students.
I was just last year in Hartford. There were some schools that, like you said, Steve, the staff had convinced the student body and convinced themselves that law enforcement was slave catchers. This was the legacy of slave catching, and these were Nazis, and that they were traumatized. They would cause trauma. And literally, they couldn't have cops anywhere near the school because they successfully scared the hell out of 15-year-old, sophomore girls into thinking that anybody with a gun and badge is going to come shoot them. So what happened was, when the TikTok challenge stuff happened, a bunch of brawls broke out in the schools, and there was nothing they could do because they can't have anybody come, because if they can bring the cops in, then everybody's going to be traumatized. So then the punks run the schools and disrupt the classroom, and that's just how it is. And so they graduate in Connecticut, graduate not knowing how to read one word. One girl graduated at a school in Connecticut without learning how to speak English, and she's now at UConn, which is how they do that stuff there. I mean, it's just amazing, and it's a horrible, toxic trap. And schools you need to be able to follow the money. It's not going to happen. I don't think it happens in New Hampshire, where you can send your kids somewhere to learn or to not get beat up or be essentially in a prison, or a gender assignment factory. But it's we're too locked in. We're under. I mean, the public school system is just gone, just gone. And Graham, that's why I'm like, the more I hear about people homeschooling, the better. And if there's any kind of way to federally subsidize it, that would be great, because these states, obviously, who belong to the teachers unions, are not going to do a damn thing.
Yeah, and there is a thriving and growing homeschool community in Maine. So in Maine, the test scores are just plummeting. Maine used to be, a couple years ago, like 10, 15 years ago, among the best in the nation in terms of education. Now it's at the bottom, basically all the rankings. In high school, it's ranked dead last in the nation in U.S. News and World Report. And Jonah Davids, who's the education fellow at the Maine Policy Institute, and we had him on a couple shows here about a year ago or so. And he is at he goes to all these conferences that the schools have with the teachers and the Maine Department of Education. And essentially, the way he described it is what they're doing is they're using AI as an excuse for the failing test scores. They're saying, oh, we don't actually need to teach the kids these fundamental topics like math and reading, because in the future, people are just going to use AI for everything. So instead, we're going to focus on social, emotional learning, mental health. Obviously, that's not working either, because mental health rates are also at an all-time low. But if the focus is if you're shifting the focus away from learning and putting the focus on these social, emotional topics. And then you have these teachers that are so emotionally traumatized by watching MSNBC all day. Obviously, the natural movement of that is those talking points are going to start moving into the classroom. And I think that's clearly happening in Maine. We have another story that I just sent it directly to Seamus, so I don't think you guys even know about it. And I'll just say it now because it's not a huge top secret thing. But there's a high school student support coordinator in Maine who has decided she's launching a new Instagram series. She is doing one piece of artwork a day to end the ice occupation. So it's,
finally.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We'd all been waiting for that. What took her so long?
I know.
Holy
And
cow.
she's a true hero. Yeah. So and it's quite the artwork. She's drawing American flags and lighting them on fire, and it's quite heroic. So I think it's a pretty it's a safe assumption to assume if she is investing all these time on a TikTok, Instagram series, that these thoughts are probably making their way into the classroom as well.
You know, you always hear the teachers will say, if you bring up the fact that the public school teachers get the whole summer off, they'll bring up the fact that, but we spend so much money buying supplies for our classroom. That's what teachers just spend money out of pocket, and that's not factored into their salaries. I wonder how far away we are from the teachers complaining that they need raises because they're having to spend so much of their money to buy American flags to burn to protest ICE. And these stories really aren't new. I think a few of the first big stories that the Maine Wire did when I took it over at the beginning of 2023 involved education. One of them was the undercover recording that an 8th grader made of a public school teacher who is still employed, by the way. I think was the one caught on a game camera stealing a Trump sign or destroying a Trump sign.
That's right.
This woman was an adult, and she's ranting at an 8th grader about the evils of Donald Trump and how wonderful Kamala Harris is, and just like telling him lies. But even if she wasn't lying, it was so wildly inappropriate a conversation for her to have. And it makes you wonder, how much is that happening when the kid isn't savvy enough to record that conversation, when the kid doesn't recognize that that's wrong and inappropriate and shouldn't be happening. And then the other one that I flagged in the chat here, I don't know if people can see that on X or just on Facebook, but there was a whole march during Black Lives Matter. I think this was even in 2022 or 2023. There were very young kids were marched out with their teachers, chanting something about racial justice or Black Lives Matter, but very clearly all led by adults who have zero sense that what they're doing is just totally inappropriate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Steve, one part of Governor Bill's State of the State we didn't really talk about is this new push that she's doing to ban cell phones from classrooms. And I do understand intellectually the benefits of doing that. But the downside of doing that is that it's going to eliminate all of these undercover recordings and all the photos of the pride flags everywhere that we're seeing. So,
well, not necessarily, Graham. Not necessarily. If there's a student out there or a parent out there who needs a recording situation, they can get in touch with me and we'll hook it up. We can make sure that all those teachers get recorded if that needs to happen. Though it doesn't necessarily need to be a cell phone. But I think you're right, though, that an unintended side effect of that will be less transparency into schools, because even the case of the trans student, the male student that beat the crap out of that female student up at MDI with a metal water bottle, just getting off the school bus. We might never have known that had happened if there was a ban on cell phones at schools. I would be in favor of a policy. Someone I know in my family who's in education used to have a box lined with tinfoil. And if you were abusing your cell phone, you're using it during class, it was becoming a distraction. He'd take your phone and he'd put it in the aluminum box, and it cuts off the signal, and your cell phone burns battery searching for signals. So by the end of the class, you've got a dead phone for the rest of the day. That seems to me like an informal, smart way to manage cell phones, but that is a tricky policy. And really, is that what you need in a State of the State speech? You know, should that be coming from the governor? We used to prioritize local control here. You know, school districts. What do we even have school boards for? And you know, principals for, if the governor is determining, you know, device policies for every single school.
And once again, it's not addressing the problem. The problem doing it in the classroom, and the teacher says, put your cell phone away, and they give the teacher the middle finger. And if the teacher tells them to do it again, they throw their chair at the teacher or threaten to knock the teacher out. But we're not going after those punks, because that could result in optics that we don't like. So now nice little students, you know, sophomore girls now have to hand over their phones who weren't using them anyway. And so, you know, when the next Uvalde police decided that it's not time to go in and stop a shooting, you know, parents can't know. It's like, I want my kids to have cell phones in schools because they're not punks for the most part. And I want to know if something's going on bad at that school. First of all, if somebody wants to take a kid on a gender voyage, I want to know about that. You know, I don't want to I want to know things. And if there's something goes down at the school, like a shooting, I want to know about that too. I don't trust the institutions enough to keep kids safe, because out of an abundance of caution, we've seen too many of these school shootings just last longer than they needed to. I do want to get to bad behavior, though. Oh, yeah, one more thing I want to go back to, Steve, because it hurts me personally. Something you just said is that the teachers complaining about school supplies, which they do as well. But we have to, and this is not just a Massachusetts thing, we have to buy the supplies at the beginning of the year for the students. So each student has to pay $100, and that's getting paper towels, Windex, wipes, crayons, magic markers, erasers, pads. That's everything. $100 per student. So for me right now, that's $400 walking in. And you know what it is? It's their way of saying, hey, you know, we don't want to have to shake you down for these supplies, but you know, we don't have money again. So next time you can jack up the property taxes, I'd do it.
Oh. Well, no, that all that is, that's just taxes. You know, they're just that there are so many different ways that governments level taxes. That's just an example of a tax not approved by the legislature, imposed by the school or the school committee. You've got plenty of municipalities where the school is effectively running the city and setting the taxes. You know, I don't know how they're getting away with that. That sounds like an interesting case for somebody to come in and file, you know, a public interest lawsuit to stop that from happening. Because why are you paying property taxes if you've got to shell out money, you know, so that your kids can wipe their butts? I mean, why don't you just tell them that you should tell the school that your kids are like the Somali LL Bean workers and they need cups of water to clean with. See how that goes over.
Yeah, no, it is interesting how that works, because, you know, when you go to the RMV look, I don't have to bring the pens for them and stuff and the computer monitors. It's only
that's true. It's true. Am I going to have to start, you know, handing out 6 hours to the police officers too when they show up, or, you know, connect a hose for the fire department?
It's right along those lines, but it does remind me a little bit that it's too cute. And I'll lay off this in a second, because if you go to where I live, if you go to Walmart or Target or Staples at the beginning of the school year, they have special sections set up at each of these stores that say the names of the town. If you live in Raleigh, here's all your stuff. If you live in Georgetown, here's all your stuff. It's odd how they just seem to know, coordinated with the schools, like exactly what you'll need. Here, we've got it all for you. We just happen to know. Anyway, I'm going to get myself in a tizzy if I keep thinking about this. Maine Wire today, you will get away with it. Flyer tells waiters and mechanics to sabotage ice. I actually love this. This is technically a Daily Caller News Foundation story, but it's a great story. A flyer posted in Minneapolis tells residents they can fight ice without any risks. Minneapolis Spring, a leftist X account, posted a picture of the flyer Wednesday claiming residents have no excuses and will get away with it, referring to injuring or inconveniencing law enforcement. Flyer tells residents to over-tighten lug nuts, or strip spark plugs, claiming it's your right to make mistakes. Flyer also mentions losing paperwork, preparing food incorrectly, and giving agents decaf instead of regular coffee. Bastards. Everything adds up, it claims. You have no excuses anymore. Just do it. So this is the new subversive way that these people want to fight now, to give you decaf coffee, to F around with your car, to use whatever vocation you're part of to be part of the resistance, John. And it seems to me that this is not great for society.
I mean, how did we, you speak about not great for society. How did we get here? Okay, you don't agree with ICE. Great. But, so you're going to give them decaf coffee and you think you're making a difference in the world? I mean, Graham mentioned it before. We've got a mental health crisis in America, and it's right here, right in front of us. We're reading it right here on the screen. This is mental health. I mean, you're actively trying to sabotage somebody's car so something could go wrong. I mean, and go back to the earlier comment about Shenna Bellows saying Christy No murdered people. Well, here you're attempting to sabotage people. I mean, have we lost our way? And more importantly, how do we get out of this? This is acceptable behavior. I mean, I love to disagree with people. It's my favorite thing in the world to do, is disagree with people and then kind of work towards the middle and come up with a common thing. But you can't even have a reasonable conversation with the person who printed this thing. I mean, can you?
I can tell you one thing. If I go somewhere and I find out that somebody has tampered with my chicken parmesan because they don't like my politics, I will be learning quickly how to make a Molotov cocktail and expressing my displeasure that way. You cannot.
Well, let's be honest. It's going to be tripe. It's going to be organ meats, not chicken parmesan. If it's your ordering.
That's what I was going to use as an example, but I didn't think everybody would know what I meant. But it would be tripe, and my mind was thinking of tripe. If somebody effed with my tripe, it is over if that happens. But Graham, you can't have people spitting in stuff and messing with stuff.
Well, Tom, if someone's doing that, do you think they're not going to take advantage of the paid family leave program to get out and protest? Do you think they're going to diligently work to get off food stamps and all the other government benefits? Like, no, obviously they're going to be taking advantage of all these programs to the best of their ability. And like, there is probably going to be no accountability for that either. So like, that particular flyer was in Minnesota, but Maine has a very similar paid family leave program. And I will be fascinated to see the uptick in individuals who start taking advantage of that about 4 to 5 weeks before the election. So yeah, we shall see.
I would say look out for the barista class. They're very self-important already. And, the ones that haven't already unionized or which results in the closing of their restaurant seem to be very militant out there. Before we go, guys, by the way, I feel like I'm missing something glaring and huge. I don't know if it's there are things
I mean, we have to talk about these Chinese biolabs. I mean, this for me is the biggest story in the country right now. A second Chinese biolab located in Nevada, linked through property records to the first one found in California, where there are like mice with human genes spliced into them, and they're finding smallpox and Ebola. Very clearly, these are Chinese bioweapon laboratories operating on U.S. soil. And what the hell is the government doing about it? It seems like the first one just kind of faded away, and it was the same thing with the early excuses about COVID-19 and wet markets. It was like, those crazy Chinese people, they just have those really, really wet markets with all kinds of weird creatures where viruses just, you catch them. And that's the most reasonable explanation for COVID-19 happening. That's what they actually went with as an explanation. Yeah. But now you have these labs that are just disgusting and filthy. And honestly, they remind me of some of the Chinese marijuana grows that we encountered when we were investigating and making our documentary. And when I saw some of the material that was being pulled out of the lab in Nevada, I had a flashback to some images that we obtained of material that was abandoned at a marijuana grow. I think I texted them to you, Matt, if you have them and can show them. But we found medical equipment that had been abandoned at one of these sites that was shipped in false packaging. It was, there it is right there. That was left behind at a Chinese marijuana grow, along with pipettes. And much of it was shipped in a very large box labeled acetaminophen, and there were some Chinese characters on the sides of it. So it was shipped under a false label, and it contained medical equipment that, as far as I can tell, had no use for large-scale marijuana growing. So I wonder how many other biolabs do they have here? They're not working on the cure for cancer. I don't think they got any, they're not, running around with pink ribbons trying to cure diseases. They're here for no good whatsoever. And to me, the lack of attention that these stories get is, it's remarkable.
Yeah,
Why
Steve,
is
we
there-
had a source that got access to one of these properties when we were filming the documentary, and told us that when they left the property, they were itching for like the ride home, and it was just generally feeling uncomfortable. So there's definitely some questions to be begged there. There's another photo we have that we never really could figure out, that a source got, of like a dehumidifier, like a very expensive looking fancy, like almost like a fridge that you would make sourdough in, where it's like in between a freezer and a fridge temperature, like 55 degrees. And it was empty, and we could never figure out what that was for. And I assumed it might have been something to do with camera equipment, but that was just a total guess. But in the light of this new information, that leads me to question if potentially some of these chemicals or some of these biohazards needed to be stored in a specific temperature, and that's what that was for.
And as I've said to Tucker, to Sean Ryan, to really anyone who will listen, what the Chinese marijuana industry has created is a network for the distribution of substances Americans will consume throughout, 5,000 cities in the United States. So they've got these little vials that they'll make of THC extract, and right now it could be lemon kush or blueberry bud or whatever the brand name is, and they get on trucks and they're at smoke shops and they're sold all throughout the United States. But what better delivery mechanism could you have for a bioweapon if you were intending to start a mass epidemic in the United States, to attack the United States? These are not unrealistic things. This is a multimodal network that could be switched on a dime, and you'd have, how many hundreds of thousands of Americans within a week would be huffing on vape pens that were giving them, pangolin pox or COVID-27, whatever they'll call the next virus that China unleashes. And honestly, I have no idea what the effective strategy is for Trump to combat what's already here in terms of biolabs, but you got to chimp out. You got to go nuts. It's got to be like all the student visas are gone. See you later. Everybody's going home. No more, Chinese professorships. No more study partnerships. Sorry, like we know you're stealing our technology. We've put up with it for too long, but you have to maximum chimping out. Now is the time for chimping. Go crazy and be belligerent and kick them the hell out. Don't allow it. That's the only thing. That's the only thing they'll respond to.
We do the maximum chimping. If it comes from Trump, then every lesbian poet and male nurse in their Subarus on signal chats are going to go try to intervene on behalf of the Chinese actors. So
I mean, maybe, but I think weirdly the left are maybe a little bit racist against Chinese people. Like I don't think they have the same protected status as Gazans or Central Americans. I don't think that they'll have the same level of protection afforded to them. Not saying that the Rainbow Brigade is going to line up in support of a tough on China policy, but by and large, the left still agrees, if you can talk to them clearly about it, that stuff like slavery in Western China is bad. Forced harvesting of organs from religious minorities is bad. They can still agree on those kinds of things. But absolutely, the policy needs to be to chimp out, make it a diplomatic crisis until you can figure out what exactly is going on here. And I can't for the life of me understand how you have this one lab set up where we know the property records associated with it, and that was like 8 months ago, and we're only now learning about another property that the same guy owns that is doing the same exact thing. Who's running the investigations? Who's turning over stones? Is it really going to fall to Steve Robinson and Graham Pollard to start hunting down the biolabs as well? Because there's only so much time in the day. There's only so many things we can do.
Somebody in the
Facebook Maine Wire stylized hazmat suit, Steve, and I'm in. I'll go track those down.
Yes, our sources will definitely need to have hazmat suits so that our sources don't have adverse reactions to mold and pesticide on weed that our sources encounter.
Somebody said in the Facebook chat that they should ask Janet Mills' brother if he's been closing any properties with labs included. And that's not a bad query to make, as a matter of fact.
It's a fair question.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that they should probably be asking him that under oath. I don't think that needs to be asking for a favor. I think there's enough publicly known about his relationship with those individuals that he should probably be questioned by law enforcement, just based on what's known publicly. I mean, we have more coming in that regard, but just based on the previous story we published, there's enough for federal law enforcement to question him about the extent of his knowledge of the illegal Chinese operations in this state. And one last thing I'll say to circle back around to the beginning, Maine does also have a prohibition on executive branch employees using public resources for the benefit of their campaigns. So that is prohibited activity here in the state of Maine. Not supposed to, when you're on duty as a executive branch employee, you're not supposed to be engaged in partisan activity. You're not supposed to be doing it in state-owned or leased workspaces while wearing a uniform or the insignia of your
Steve, I have a question for you.
Yes.
I have a question for you. Does Maine have an attorney general?
That is you're a few steps ahead of me because we are the Maine has both an ethics commission run by Jonathan Wayne, who's a pleasant individual. The ethics commission would theoretically investigate this if there were a complaint brought, usually by a partisan figure or a state lawmaker or another candidate would bring a complaint. The ethics commission would investigate to get to the bottom of it. The ethics commission has very limited investigatory tools. In my experience, just what I've observed, they seem very circumscribed in what they can do. Basically, if you forge a signature on your Maine Clean Elections Act Welfare for Politicians application, they'll come and get you. But other than that, there's basically nothing they can do. But they would make a recommendation to the Attorney General, and then the Attorney General, of course, would finish up in his soundproof office and then quickly broom the case.
I talked to Brenda Kelsey just today, Steve, about an ethics violation in Lewiston, and she basically kind of threw her hands up and goes, there's not much we can do. So,
are you talking about Brenda Kilty, the public access ombudsman?
Yes, yeah.
That's a different, completely useless branch of government. Both useless and toothless. Brenda, again, also a very nice woman, but statutorily, she just has no power. She can make recommendations to agencies about how they should handle public records and transparency, but the agencies can and do ignore her. For example, she has told all of the agencies that they shouldn't just create emails that are, DHS FOA at maine.gov. They shouldn't have these ghost email accounts where no one is specifically accountable for answering them. All of the agencies still do this because you can have an auto reply that responds acknowledging the request, and you've satisfied the bare minimum of what the law requires of you. So again, totally useless. It is a violation what Shenna and her staff are doing. I'm sure those deputy secretaries of state are just full-time campaign staffers, but there'll never be any consequences for it because Maine's totally lost its ability to self-police. And the only way the laws get enforced, the only way we get justice is through federal intervention.
All right, before we go, I just want to tell people, check back at the Robinson Report in the Maine Wire. We are, when I say we are, John Featherston is working on a story that I think is fantastic, and it involves the feds having had enough with some law enforcement in Maine, and it's juicy and it's fantastic, and it'll I assume drop tomorrow morning, John, or tonight. But
wait for some people to get back to me in comments, but it should be a good one. Yeah, should be a good one.
All right, Graham Pollard, Steve Robinson. I am Tom Shattuck. He is John Featherston. Thanks so much for joining us every day at 4 p.m. Tell your friends. I know a bunch of people have shared this on Facebook, but Maine Wire TV is every day at 4 p.m. and sometimes even more often, depending if the world seems to be crashing down around us. All right, stay with us. We'll see you.